Hi everybody and welcome. It's another Wordlift monthly roundtable today with Emilija and Matt. And I'm going to sing the song, like it or not. A quick hello and we're good to go. Welcome to the show, Emilija and Matt.
Bravo. Very good. Thought you were going to give us the metal version though.
Well, I've just realized as well, Emilija sang to me last time and you're a musician, Matt. So it's actually me singing my silly song to two people who actually know what they're talking about.
Yeah, well, you did a wonderful job as always.
How charming, Matt. Thank you very much. Anton, I think I should be at the bottom because we're actually going to hear much more from Matt and Emilija than we have from me. Today, we're talking about building topical authority and brand awareness through entity analytics. I'm really, really excited about this. I was thinking about, we want to started with the idea of brand awareness and topical authority. And I foolishly said that I would actually say something about that. So I'm going to introduce it, and then I would love you guys to jump in and save me from myself when I kind of dig myself into some rabbit hole that doesn't really help. But from my perspective, brand awareness, what are we talking about? We're talking about having your brand in front of the audience that is relevant for that brand. And a lot of companies just push their name out there and think, right, I've got lots and lots of presence online, therefore I have brand awareness and I'm being seen. And the key to brand awareness is not so much being seen everywhere, but being seen in the right places. And that's an incredibly important thing that we need to measure. And the reason I bring that up is, of course, because that's exactly what Kalicube Pro does. So that's my little upsell pitch. And topical authority, what really interested me about that, and I said to you, Matt, I think I've got a good idea of something to say, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but the brand needs to be understood by Google in terms of the knowledge graph. It needs to be understood for Google to be able to confidently, or increasingly so, confidently match what you are and what you offer to what your audience is looking for and who you're going to be relevant for. And topical authority, topics are entities too. And so topical authority is you being linked closely to specific topics as an authority, as an expert, and being trustworthy, which allows me then to say the super duper keyword of the moment, the popular fashionable world, EAT. If Google doesn't understand who you are, how can it possibly apply with confidence, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness signals? And in terms of topical authority, if it cannot see which topics you're closely related to, how can it possibly understand to whom and in what circumstances you will be a relevant and a helpful result for its users? Sound good?
Sounds great.
Yeah, sounds great. I think that's a wonderful introduction by you, Jason. And I would like to say that I'm really happy that we have this webinar together, the three of us, because all of us are experts somehow in the topic related to brand awareness and topical authority, like Jason, you, the brand serve guy, the brand management knowledge that you possess, but also Matt, that is applying anthropology into business and product development and so on. And me, that I have different experience. I'm not sure that whether Matt and you, Jason, know this, but actually I'm a former famous person in my home country because I was a Pop Idol finalist. I definitely know how to manage brands. Yeah.
Ooh,
and
wow, cool.
Also worked for small and medium-sized companies. You also worked for big companies. So we will try to find not maybe a unified way, but interesting perspective into how to care about brand awareness and topical authority in general. So this is a very interesting topic because when you think about it, there are several theoretically and managerially relevant dimensions in the selection of the brand names and also the depiction of the symbols. For example, how do you choose a brand name and how do you choose the appropriate brand picture when it comes to the logo, right? I mean, like you said, this is something that you can have an opinion on how to approach it, meaning that you have the presence and know what people look for, but is it memorable and how do you actually choose memorable names? So basically, we need some sort of a way to decide about how to pick brand names and brand logos as well. So should it be something that will communicate the company name only, for example, Apple, or whether it should be something that will communicate, for example, the brand name plus the name of the product, like Proton Mail has, like Proton Mail Situation, for example. And this is something that, according to my opinion, requires a bit more scientific approach, more something that will work with data in the background, especially something that is cross-checked with Google and Knowledge Graph at the same time. So this is definitely something that we're looking forward to. And when it comes to topical authority, that's interesting as well too, because I think that Kevin Indig had a fantastic piece of work regarding this matter. But overall, to sum it up, there's no agreement, let's say, among SEO professionals in the field about what topical authority is, because all of the SEO professionals define it differently. Some define it as a depth of expertise that you're using to show through writing comprehensive content for your users, while others describe it as a way of balancing page rank or finding more authoritative sources, and it's way different. So I will try to explain that through an example. As me being half Serbian, I will use the topic of Novak Djokovic. For example, if you're writing about Novak, you will also think about some associations, for example, championships, or maybe Wimbledon, or maybe Jelena Djokovic, which is his wife, or maybe even his opponents like Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer, or maybe you will think about their countries of origin as well, like Switzerland and Spain. So this is something that you need to know how it expands, like how the information tree expands from there, but in a more scientific way. And this is definitely something that we will cover during this webinar with Matt and you, Jason, as well.
Brilliant. No, I love information tree. It's a term I've heard before, but when you say it, the more you say it, the more I think, yeah, it just makes so much sense. And it's such a lovely visual representation. But one thing you did say is picking a brand name. I remember, I'm so old, back in the 80s and 90s, companies would pay people hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars to sit in a bar coming up with ideas of unique brand names and arguing it out. I mean, my ex-wife was in the advertising industry, and they got paid fortunes for these kind of, I don't know, basically throw a dart and hope you hit the board. And you're now saying it's all about data. Oh, I think we've lost Emilija. So Matt, can you make a comment about that? Or do you want to introduce your concept of brand awareness and topical authority?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me on, Jason. I'm glad to be here with both of you.
I actually didn't introduce anybody, did I? So this is Matt. That's an Emilija. Off you go, Matt.
Thanks. And so, yeah, I come at things from an anthropological perspective, applying anthropology to business and design. And, the thing that I think is interesting about brands, especially what we were just talking about, is it is actually more than the logo, right? It is, in a sense, the sum of all experiences someone has with an organization or arguably even a personal brand. And so, that does bring up, I think, related to today, the concept of brand positioning and how do you differentiate yourself. And I agree with you that in terms of the logo, people charge lots of money. Often, agencies charge lots of money for brand marks. There is probably a degree to which some people are guessing and hoping for the best. There are other firms which take certainly a much more research-driven approach. I'm interested to hear Emilija's perspective because the people I know who work in the industry, we would generally, argue for starting at least or involving at least a qualitative approach, but we often use mixed methods approaches. And so this sort of entity-driven sort of understanding is, of course, very interesting. But getting back to brand positioning and as it relates to topical authority, the thing that I think is really interesting right now in this space is that, everybody seems to be kind of, as Emilija said, like talking about you need to write with breadth and depth to cover more or less, I would say, like what Google already understands. And I would argue that, one, that's not sufficient,
right?
Because everybody's doing that. And so you're not differentiating yourself. Yeah. But two, because also the vast majority of knowledge has not really been modeled yet, right, around the world. And something as simple as like the word no in English can have multiple meanings in other languages. And so, as we're talking about concepts on the web, how does that necessarily map out, as just a very simple example. And so I don't think it's enough to just write what everybody else is doing. And right now I'm in a new space. I'm looking for like soundproofing material. Every website I look at is the exact same content with the exact same affiliate links linking to the same products on Amazon. And it's infuriating because everybody's trying to cover this topical space, but nobody's really providing any value, in my opinion.
Right, yeah, no, 100%. And there are a couple of interesting points from my perspective, I mean, more than a couple, obviously, but that I want to focus on. And one of those is that everybody's doing the same thing, and that drives me nuts. It used to be link building and counting keywords, and now it's talking about everything within your topical realm, filling the articles with entities. Differentiating yourself and actually providing content that has true value, is that the differentiator?
Yeah, I think so. And the question is, how do you get there, of course, right? In my opinion, if you're purely doing, Google research, in a sense, all you're doing is looking at what other people are doing, whether you're looking at, questions asked, or even using keyword tools. And I think, as the conversation progresses today, we're going to kind of maybe unpack this a bit, but I think it comes down in many ways to, how much do you actually know about the topic, from sort of a known perspective to an unknown perspective. And there's some obviously areas in between. And I think the methods that you would take to get there would be different. Sometimes they should use like, the Wordlift add-on, as well as maybe other tools. And then other times, maybe they are simply not, maybe there's another place you need to start. And I think, we'll maybe wait for Emilija to come back before we get into that. But something else, just because of your question that I think is maybe worth elaborating on, I think I'm probably the first anthropologist that's on your many shows talking about such things. And so I think there's an interesting perspective that everybody in the field might benefit from hearing, which is, when we're talking about, broadly speaking, the semantic web, we are talking about meaning, right? And meaning is really what anthropology is concerned with. We're concerned with meaning and we're concerned with context. And that's for, all things human. And so if Google, like say, as the main search engine, is concerned with meaning, and Google is inherently global, bar, maybe a few hermit countries, what does it mean to really be, to demonstrate topical authority from a global perspective, especially when they're using modern techniques that are going to be better at language translation and, language understanding? And I put understanding in air quotes because it might not be truly global understanding or cross-cultural understanding. And so I see an opportunity here for anthropology to contribute to to Web3 and the semantic web, in that if you're trying to differentiate yourself, I think there are some things you can take from both like the Wordlift add-on and from an anthropological or qualitative approach and blend them together to write new content, to first discover new content and write something that is actually a little bit different than what everybody else is doing.
100%. And so kind of what you're saying is SEOs, we now need to embrace anthropology.
I think I think you can, I don't think you need to become anthropologists. I think you could be maybe anthropologically minded or anthropologically curious and take from our sort of holistic perspective, take some other concepts and particularly like take, maybe the methods of anthropology and apply them to the work. And instead of just doing basic, starting with like a keyword research tool or just, Google research or even the Wordlift add-on, I think you can take all of those methods and blend them with some methods from, the social sciences at large and, and particularly anthropology to develop new understandings of the problem space so that you're not just regurgitating what everybody else is.
Right. And well, it brings me to another question, which is if I'm truly an expert in my field, I would naturally write an article that's anthropologically, if we're allowed to say that, complete, and also would hit all the right buttons in terms of entities and in fact in terms of search queries and keywords for Google.
I would say yes in your own culture, but not necessarily in a cross-cultural perspective. And if Google is looking at, all of the languages in which meaning might be different, the word no means one thing in English and can mean different things, might have multiple meanings in other language. So if we are intending to really demonstrate authority, then it might, you might not even be considered, you might be an expert in your culture, but not beyond that. And Emilija, I'll just kind of catch you up. So what I'll be super fast. I was suggesting that along with tools like Wordlift and other tools that people are comfortable with, there are other methods that you could bring in to create a more holistic sort of understanding. And was saying to Jason that brand is really about some experience somebody has with an organization or a personal brand, and with us we need, if we want that experience to be good, and if we want to position ourselves, we need to differentiate ourselves, which is why we actually need to go beyond what most people consider topical authority today, to write new content that doesn't exist elsewhere. And your armchair Google research is not always sufficient.
I absolutely agree with that. Thank you.
No, that's brilliant. One huge question. Sorry, Emilija, welcome back. Glad to have you back. Relieved to have you back.
You can imagine what you think everything is prepared, and from time to time you face stuff like this. But yeah, I think that Matt had his own time on his own to develop his ideas, because all of us have different directions in which this conversation can go, and yeah.
Well, one thing I really wanted to kind of build into this conversation, it's purely personal and purely because I'm intrigued by it, is Matt, you mentioned, I'm not sure quite how you put it, but we don't know what Google knows.
We don't, and I would also say that they don't know all, they don't know all of the sum of all knowledge yet. But people, broadly speaking, know it, right? We don't have it collected and collated in such a way where any one person or any one tool necessarily knows it. But a tool like, Wordlift might help you get to a piece of it, but then maybe you're going to want to take that as an input into some other method, and vice versa. Maybe if I do qualitative research and I understand something, I want to take that and then put it into Wordlift and expand on what I know.
Yeah, Google doesn't know what Google knows, apparently, according to Anton. That was his interpretation of what you just said. So from kind of that perspective, it really is that humans dancing with machines that Andrea Volpini talks about delightfully. And the other thing he says that always sticks in my mind is we're building the airplane as we fly.
Yeah.
And I think we've lost Emilija again, which is deeply unfortunate, because she was about to pick up the baton and take us on to the next stage. Oh, you're back, Emilija.
For me, I see that I'm here all the time, so I have no idea why is this happening, but I wanted to show you the add-on. Are we ready for some demo on how we can approach brand awareness and topical authority? Okay, I will try to share my screen now. So share screen, okay. Do you see my spreadsheet?
Not yet.
We don't, no. There's a problem with the sound. We can't see it down at the bottom there, so we can't add it, unfortunately.
Do you see it now?
Afraid not. Nope.
Okay, here we go. It should work now.
That's the one. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Anton, off you go. Sorry, Anton, I did your job very badly.
Okay, so let us imagine that I'm a content writer, and we know about all these different keyword research tools that we're using in the process, and also we can definitely work with Google Search Console data. But let's just assume that I'm a content writer and I want to write about all these topics, basically the topics of today's webinar, like topical authority, SEO marketing, brand analysis, and brand awareness. But I am not sure about which concept these topics are connected to. So basically when I play with the add-on, and you can start with your own keywords. For example, these are the keywords that I will be initially providing. You go to tools, actually extensions, and then you go to Wordlift, and then you go open. And you will do the analysis there. So for the sake of saving time, I already did the analysis before. And all the connected concept to this topics here are actually shown in the next sheet, which I call connected concepts, and we can see them right here. So, so we can see, for example, that for the topical authority, we have the label of writing. Or for example, for the topic of SEO marketing, we have the topic, the web. And this is very interesting because I think that many SEOs, when do analysis for SEO marketing, for example, they do not tend to think about the World Wide Web here. I mean, this is cross-checked with Wikipedia, which is a popular knowledge base because we have an NLP model that is pre-trained on Wikipedia. So basically, if I pick this up here, oops, and try to post it here, we can see that this is the entity that is disambiguated in which language I'm not sure, but I can try translate to English. And we can see that it's the entity about World Wide Web, and where we also have this description of it. So basically, we understand what this concept is about. And this is something that casual keyword research tools are missing, because you do not have this cross-check with a popular knowledge base. And the same holds for the entities that are shown here. For example, we can see multiple entities for SEO marketing, like website and website traffic and search engines. Some of these are definitely obvious. Let's say find something that is a bit more unexpected. So let's say that for SEO marketing, we have tracking, or maybe we have for brand analysis, we have taglines. So I definitely wasn't thinking about taglines when I expand this right across further. So what I have is, I know the value of it, the confidence that this is relevant is 0.387. But maybe I can find something that is more interesting. For example, let's say this is a relatively important, that's definitely a good score. For example, for SEO marketing, we have the score of 1 for social media marketing. So from there, I can expand. I will have the SEO section. I will have maybe the SEO marketing section as a parent category, but this can be a child category, or maybe a sibling category where we can expand on social media marketing further. And to sum this up, basically, the two advantages that this tool that we're using, and you can develop your own tool that will do NLP analysis if you have the engineering resources, but this is definitely more efficient, very scalable, and very fast, because we cared about that on Wordlift. We do two stuff: cross-checking it with Google, understanding from the search engine result pages analysis, which are the entities based on an NLP approach that are most relevant to the targeted entity that we provided here. So like I said, these are the initial topics of topical authority, SEO marketing, brand analysis, and brand awareness. And we can see their confidence scores, but also cross-check them with Divopedia, and not just any Divopedia, but actually multiple Divopedias in this case, the German one, the Polish one, what else can I see, the English one, and so on. So this is something that I wanted to show to you today.
Right, brilliant. I mean, kind of what I can see there as well. I mean, the first thing that sprung to my mind is, as you said, tagline is not something I had associated with with brands in
maybe
just
not
in that
on
sense.
First sight, yeah. Maybe not on first sight.
It plays into what Dawn Anderson and Bill Slawski were talking about a great deal, is context clouds.
Yeah,
and building up these context clouds that create the context, and it's not immediately obvious. And while you were away, Matt and I were talking about, as an expert, I should naturally be including these in what I'm writing. But something like this tool helps me to A, reassure myself, and B, give me ideas that I wouldn't necessarily have thought about.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, typical keyword research tool will give you the keywords through various tools that you can obtain. For example, like Google frequently asked questions, or people also ask, and so on. But they're not using an NLP approach. They're just scraping data. They do not have an NLP approach established in the background like we have here. So like I said, maybe you can use the concept of semantic similarity to determine which are the most semantically relevant keywords to the initial keywords provided. So that's the first advantage of this tool, and the first advantage that you can use to develop maybe your own. And the second one is that it's cross-checked with Divopedia. So definitely, me as an expert, I should have known that maybe this is something that I should write about, but definitely I don't have the scalability of an IT tool. So that's the problem that we humans face, because we cannot do this analysis at scale. We are very, very limited into it.
Right. Yeah. Thoughts about that, Matt, before I come to my next question?
Sure. So, something like that term would be essentially in the space of like an unknown known, right? So something we understand but not are aware of. So you might, as an expert, know it, but you, for whatever reason, might forget it, right? We kind of don't think to include it. And so the question there is, of course, how do you uncover those? And so a tool like this is great. My other comment would be, though, what if you are a consultant in a new industry and you don't really know anything about it? So Emilija, like, how might you go about, say, a scenario like that? Would you have any kind of approach?
So yeah, that is why I decided working with initial keywords because of course maybe you don't have the data. Like I didn't work with a connected Google Search Console in this case, but you definitely know certain keywords that might describe your topic, your industry, your niche, right? Because you might not have data from Google on your side because you didn't establish a website already, or maybe you don't know any other tool that might help you in your specific case. But that is why we started working with initial keywords. So, and cross-check that with Google, at least what is seen on Google, because all these search engine optimization efforts are done for the sake of what users search for a certain niche and what Google sees as important for that niche as well. So that will be my approach for starters.
Right. I mean, because I was kind of intrigued by that idea. I think agencies, for example, you come in to work for a new client, you know nothing about their expertise, you know nothing about it, and you want to give them advice. And traditionally, we go to tools like Ahrefs and SEMrush, and we find the keywords. And you're saying this is in addition to, as opposed to a replacement of.
Yeah, it's definitely, it can be used as a replacement in certain cases, depend what you're looking for. So like I said, these tools are basically using scraping techniques that are not necessarily NLP oriented. And we have an NLP approach established in the background. That's the main difference that we have here. And also this collaboration with Wikipedia, which makes this tool extremely powerful. And I think that that's the key advantage in this case.
So, Jason, if I could jump in there. So for me, I would use it as an and versus an or. And so, I think there's, another perspective of anthropology you could say is like on technology as a whole, right? Today we use that word to mean like information technology, but anthropologists have looked at all technology from like, stone hammers to IT. And so, I would say that technology is meant to enable us, but like somebody you've had on your show, I don't know if I'll pronounce it right, but Corey, I think, he uses his brain, he likes to say, right? I would use it again I would use these tools as an and, in that I might start with a keyword research tool, then bring those keywords, like say to the Wordlift tool. You get some entities, but then there's still the question of, well, how do you write something compelling that's going to produce a good UX that is, as I'm saying, that needs to be differentiated and a little bit new. And that might be an opportunity, if you don't know it as a consultant, to expand your knowledge with some other kind of research methods, qualitative methods, where you could learn a little bit more in depth about it so that you can write like an authority and actually write something that's differentiated as opposed to just regurgitating what everybody else is. And so I see these all kind of being connected as, the output of one is the input of the next.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah, and if you take that to the next stage, you get one of those writing machines to do you some AI text, and then you don't even need to write it. I mean, where does it stop? And at what point do we actually need human beings to step in and add their magic? And I would love to believe we had some magic in our souls.
I would agree with that. And, I think we've all probably played with AI writing tools, and I find them to be insufficient. I think they have value. Again, they're a tool to enable us. So like they can give you a few sentences that are usable, but then I often expand on it, right? With the knowledge that I have inherently, or the knowledge that I've gone out and gained through research. And so I it's the same with, I use AI in the creation of music. And so I look at these creative AI tools really as something that we work in concert with, not something that replaces us.
Yeah, absolutely agree with Matt on this. And I would like to add that maybe when we talk about AI generated content, definitely not sufficient nor up to the creativity that a human mind and the comprehensiveness that we have as humans. But maybe they're good for using to be used for bridging the gap and going over this initial writer's block that we're having, because and this is something that I also like about this tool, because sometimes let's say that I covered the first 10 blog posts for the SEO marketing topic, and now I'm experiencing a writer block about what to write next. And this is definitely helpful to think about, because I've seen all the labels, all the connected entities that I can use in the process to expand further, and this is very, very useful to know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, from that, I mean, you talk about writer's block. I mean, I talk more about, obviously writer's block is a thing. I'm not belittling it, but the blank sheet of paper is the single most important and difficult thing to get through. And one thing is, if somebody presents something to you, if it's a machine or a person, and you can read it and you say, well, that's not very good, or it could be better. That's an immediately wonderful bouncing off point to say, right, we're going to rewrite this. And I find that if I do that, the writing at the end is much, much better than it would have been if I didn't do that, because I'm less bogged down in the starting off point, that blank sheet of paper. And these entities that the Wordlift plugin board extension brings in is incredibly good as well. Sorry, I'm making a second point, to push me towards things that, as Matt said, I've maybe forgotten about, or I failed to realize, or I'm so dug down into my rabbit hole that I'm not looking at the bigger picture.
Absolutely correct. I completely agree with you. And sometimes when we are too much into our work, we are too biased to be objective about what is relevant and what is not. And this is definitely something that will help us go beyond this blockage and be beyond this initial blindness, let's say, like you just associated me with in the first step.
Right. There was a question in the comments, and I'm not quite sure what they were saying, but it suddenly struck me about the siloing idea, because you were talking about, I immediately thought, right, I'm going to add social media marketing to my search engine marketing article. And you said it could be a sibling, it could be a child. But also from that perspective, using this to silo your content. How important is siloing in this understanding of whatever topical authority, however we're going to call it?
Well, we definitely need to have something that at the end will have some sort of a tree structure in the end, because it's very hard to think about topics, especially for bigger blogs. Let's say this can be even used as a topic organization tool. For example, we can provide all the keywords that we already wrote about, and maybe we don't know how to organize the content. And this can help us understand which entities can be siblings and which entities can be childs, depending on their confidence score. So this is very interesting, because personally haven't tried this before, but now I realize there's a huge potential when you say it. So definitely an interesting tool worth exploring and worth playing with. So I definitely think that silo structure is important, but even more understanding all the related concepts and building the topic maps on the right way.
Right. And sorry, yeah, I was going to ask you, what were your thoughts anthropologically?
So
would we be looking at silos? Sorry, go ahead.
No. Sorry, thanks. Well, I was going to say that I'd actually be very curious to see, to maybe walk through like how we think the tool can be used for grouping. That to me would be very interesting, because I think where still a lot of these tools, I think what a lot of people are maybe get hung up on with some of these tools is they get a large list and they don't know what to do next, right? And so putting together sort of a methodology for getting to how do you cluster and how do you group and how do you understand really the ontology and sort of taxonomy of all of this is really interesting. And I didn't think of using the Wordlift tool for that, but kind of excited to explore that. But in the sort of UX space, or just historically kind of like the research space, you would see card sorting used for this, right? With the power of humans sort of being behind it, right? So, and there again, I think there's a value in probably doing both and seeing how they compare and contrast. Because there's always gaps, right? There's always bias, whether it's qualitative research or a quantitative tool like this. There is always bias introduced by the way that we choose to collect data, the way we choose to analyze it, how we choose to present it. And so multiple methods, kind of like triangulating, if you will, coming at it from different perspectives, I think helps us figure out what is the closest to maybe a truth.
Right. I mean, just one thing, and this is really for me, you just threw in qualitative and quantitative. Can you explain to me the difference
Sure.
and give me examples so that I can get my head around it in a more confident manner?
Sure. Well, I mean, a tool like this would be a quant tool, right? A lot of, you might think of most statistical methods, classically being like quant-based, economics, very quant-based, right? And I think that's what you studied. And so I think you have a quant background. Whereas, say, coming from the social sciences, we use quant methods, but we often I shouldn't say lead, but we're primarily, in many ways, at least in anthropology, trained in qualitative methods. So something like ethnography, which is grounded in observation, interviewing, to really tease out things that we don't know. And there's classic examples of why you would want to do this. People simply forget to say certain, things in maybe you have a quantitative survey. Let's use that. So you have a survey that's going to be kind of pure quant, no qualitative questions on it. You don't necessarily know what to ask to begin with. If you're not a true expert and you don't understand absolutely everything about the problem space, your survey is already inaccurate because you don't know all the questions you need to ask, right? Because you don't know everything yourself. Then, depending on, the way those questions are asked, you're going to get some various responses. So, and, people are going to do things like they tell you what they think you want to hear. Maybe they might answer the way that they think you want to hear or something. Even in interviews, there's that kind of problem. And so we observe and we talk to people to try and tease out things that maybe you would miss otherwise. And so, think of, in this space, like maybe it's protein powder. Well, everybody's writing about the different types of protein powder and how it's made up and maybe the nutritional benefits. But what about, maybe there's things that people actually do that they don't admit to ever, that nobody's writing about. If you observe actually how they go about using it and making it, maybe you're going to find maybe you find that everybody actually uses less than is prescribed, less than is recommended, because it makes them feel an uncomfortable way or something. Who knows? Right. If you see that, well, then maybe you're going to write an article suggesting, even though it says you should consume this much, maybe you should actually only try this much. Like if you get a headache or something. I've never had protein powder. I don't know.
No.
You get my point though, right?
Yeah.
A classic example from somebody, a professor of mine, somebody I worked with in the anthropology space, was she studied breakfast practices among families. And so she was looking, all the mothers were saying, oh, we always feed our kids healthy food. Well, in practice, when you observe them, they were rushing around like everybody else is in the morning, and they weren't feeding their kids healthy food. So she, as a product innovator, helped come up with Go-Gurt, the yogurt that you can kind of squeeze, if you will.
Right.
Because you can eat something healthy on the go. Right. Now, so that's what qualitative research can help you identify. Or maybe you want to look at, Trisha Wang has a TED talk on thick description, or she calls it thick data. She talks about, when she was studying cell phone usage in Asia, and how Nokia basically just wasn't seeing what she was seeing. They were telling her data set was too small. And of course, it dropped off a cliff and Apple took over. So, the quant tools, they don't always see certain things. They don't tell you why, I would say it that way. And so I'm not suggesting you shouldn't use quant. I'm suggesting we should use both. So a tool like Wordlift will tell me things, right? Will tell me kind of maybe what. But the question maybe is still why. And what could I write for a topical authority perspective that helps answer why, that makes the piece then more compelling?
Right. And so, I mean, would I hear that, other than you're not giving medical advice, which is incredibly important to anybody watching this, and breakfast advice either, Gjorgjevska or whatever it was called, is not a recommendation, that you need to talk to the people you're addressing. And that comes back to this idea of not stopping in keyword research. We say, don't stop at the keywords, ask your sales staff, ask the support staff, what are the questions, what are the words people are using? And so you do need the qualitative, but I think we forget it because we get lazy and we think Wordlift's extension is just going to do it all for me and it'll take me 5 minutes and it's job done. And we forget, I actually found a letter that I wrote when I was 20, when I was doing my economics degree. And in the letter that I wrote to a friend of mine who just found it in a box literally 2 days ago, she sent it to me and I wrote, I just spent 36 hours writing 2 essays. Sitting in the library with the books, getting them out, 2 days and 1 night, writing 2 essays. And I was looking at it thinking, I would never spend 36 hours writing an essay today, and I would certainly not sit in the library to do it. So I've just made two different points, and I don't know how I got there, but qualitative. Emilija, what's your point of view on that?
Yeah, I think what Matt taught is very interesting, and I completely agree with his viewpoint that we don't see always everything if we tend to work only with machines, because we're kind of missing the big picture here. And that is what I like in particular about this tool, is that you don't necessarily need to start with something that is tool absorbed or tool provided like Google Search Console data. That is why it's important to do your research aside as well, like you said. And what we do at Wordlift, for example, I enjoy working with Sylvia and Vale. Say hello to both of you if you're following this webinar. They're from the sales and the marketing department, and we do tend to work together around what are the most pressing issues that our customers are facing regarding using a certain product that we want to work on with, and then start developing our strategy from there. So actually, this is very important, because being able to do both stuff with a single tool is a work of magic at the same time. You have this option to go through the Google Search Console data path, but you also can work with data that is collected from different spaces. Maybe you want to use SEMrush. I don't bother about that. Maybe you worked with I don't know. You collected data from surveys that you had with your potential customers, and then you wanted to use this feedback to cross-check this with Google and Wikipedia, and this is where we are most powerful for.
Right, because I mean, you've got the prioritization, as it were, using the scores over there, but then also bringing in the qualitative data, as you were saying, Matt. You can actually prioritize using a mixture of both, because you don't necessarily want to prioritize for what Google happens to understand, or we think Google understands. You need to prioritize for both that, where it's going to perform, but also what your audience are looking for.
Yeah, I would say that let's just assume that Google has an understanding of some topic. It seems to be presumed today in the industry that if you write to every entity that it understands, that then you're going to demonstrate topical authority. But there's also an interesting opportunity here. Well, there's some questions around that, but there's also an interesting opportunity with Wordlift in general. So, like the questions, or is who gets to sort of be the authority on a topic. But I think and there's a lot of knowledge out there that's just not represented. A brief example. So like we build a dictionary. Sorry, I work for a software agency. We build a dictionary that preserves an indigenous language in the United States. That data is not really represented anywhere else today. And that's something I'd like to do as like a pet project someday, but it's just not. And so, that data is not really going to show up well, right, in any kind of knowledge base at all. And so my point here is something like that is completely missing. But an interesting opportunity about Wordlift actually as a platform as a whole is we might actually get to model new data to help Google understand new things, right? And obviously, Jason, you're deep into that. And so I think that's an interesting opportunity. And kind of in my personal brand space, that's what I've been doing in design anthropology and business anthropology, because they're not, they don't show up in knowledge bases. The only documentation on it, I don't want to say the only, but there wasn't a lot in the SERP. It was mostly books. They were very academic. They weren't approachable. And so I've been working to build that, that area, that sort of topical area hopefully for Google to understand using Wordlift. And, it appears to be working for sure. And using, the add-on helps me then find additional entities to keep sort of expanding my tree. Of course, though, it still presumes I have the knowledge to write about it. But, so I think there's, I guess in summary, my point here is there's a lot of data missing today, and we should try to fill that in. And I think using Wordlift as a whole, we get to do that.
Ooh, yeah, no, 100%. Sorry. I mean, I wish I'd said that, to be honest. I'm now incredibly envious and jealous. Well, it is really educating Google like it's a child. It doesn't know very much yet. It's got 1,500 billion facts, let's say. But that's not even a drop in the ocean of everything it needs to understand. And if we want, I would potentially argue, if we want to be the authority, we need to be the one that's leading the child, teaching the child. Because over time, even though we might not be winning the game today because we're not saying what everyone else is saying, if we're the ones teaching the child will follow us. And I found that with brand SERPs, is my coined term, is that I educated Google, and now you get people also ask, what is a brand SERP underneath my name? And when you search brand SERPs, it shows you the fundamentals of brand SERPs in my book, because it associates it as the definitive work on that. And what I'm doing is leading this child Google through a learning process in something that I invented, or coined at least, not invented the entire process. Or so maybe Topical Authority is about setting out your standard and then leading the child to new knowledge. Emilija, what do you think of my great new theory?
I think that this is beautifully explained, and I really love. Now I wish that I was the one who said that. Yeah, so the Google is definitely a child that needs a lot of explanations for stuff, and what I think that it's very useful in this case is this Wikipedia disambiguation, because when you see keywords or keyword phrases as they are, they still, in the NLP world, in the computer science world, they represent unstructured data that needs to be understood in a certain way. And if you read, for example, Google patents about how they do text comprehension, they locate all the entities that are present in the key phrase, or maybe in the keyword that is provided, no matter how you like to describe this. And we're doing exactly the same. Google is the child that needs to learn, and we are here to help.
Brilliant. And I've got a question for you, Matt, because you were playing around with the Kalicube Pro NLP analysis, and I was talking to Ali Alvi from Bing, who's the featured snippet team lead, which is at Bing, not at Google, obviously. And he was saying, in fact, we don't actually look in the knowledge graph. This was a few years ago, so they might do now. We actually just make a best guess. We analyze the text within the context, and we figure out what the entities are. And that's what Google's NLP seems to be doing at certain times. I mean, I gave you the example of Grootipoo player. And it associated me as a Grootipoo player because of the way I wrote the phrase. And Grootipoo doesn't exist. I invented the word. And so the NLP is actually guessing a great deal of the time and not necessarily looking the knowledge graph.
Yeah, no, I've heard you say that before. And so, it points to, no. It's
repeating myself terribly, yeah.
No, well, I've watched a lot of the videos, which is a testament to the work you do.
Ooh,
and, I think what that points to is, all technology, right, has bias and is fallible, and it could create the opportunity for us to, I don't know what the right word is, spam it with false facts.
Yes.
But it also is the opportunity for us to, again, contribute to building out the sum of all knowledge in a way that we get to bring our, true sort of our understanding of the world, our personal understanding, as well as the understanding of groups, and contribute that when it doesn't already exist. And so, that is a really great opportunity. And again, that I think is a way to differentiate your brand right there, right? If you get to be the really, put your stake in the ground and be the first one to expand on the existing knowledge out there. And of course, I'm saying that it seems from everything that we can discern from the industry that you need to cover all of the existing sort of topics that exist within a cluster. But then the takeaway, from my perspective, is that we need to expand on it, right? And that's our opportunity to demonstrate that we are a real thought leader, that we can produce a good user experience for somebody by really providing helpful new knowledge. And so, for me, using the Wordlift add-on, I get to cover everything that's out there. And that's wonderful. That's extremely helpful. But then I also don't discredit my own knowledge, and then I bring that to it and expand on that using, Wordlift for WordPress, and creating my own entities and really building out my own knowledge graph around design anthropology and business anthropology. And I think that's the opportunity for everybody here.
Yeah, which includes entities that Google hasn't yet understood, and once again, bringing Google to the knowledge and helping Google to understand, which means building it out. And what do you do then with the idea of expertise being that you have to agree with the general opinion about something, otherwise Google will simply not accept it as expertise? It's a little bit off topic, either of you.
Yeah, I mean, correct, jump in or correct me. I mean, I'm not sure that I can say from my worldview if, like Corey once said that, he wants just the facts, not anybody's opinion, because, they only care about the facts for the, sake of semantic search. That might be very true for Google. And maybe if you're only concerned with Google, that makes sense. But, I'm writing also for humans, of course. I want a good user experience. And I'm not saying that he's not producing good user experience, but I'm concerned with both. And so I'm okay introducing my own new facts, that I know to be true, as well as, opinions or how people might, want to think about it. Whether Google views that as authoritative or being an expert, I don't think I'm in a position to say that. But I don't think it's also harmful if you really, if you keep in mind UX. And I think we need to balance UX and SEO.
100%. I think we tend to get drowned, or within the industry, we get drowned in this idea. We need to please Google. And once again, this idea of Google's a child, and we can lead it to new places it hasn't yet seen, is a really encouraging way for us to move forwards, because it also allows us to build out our tree, as you guys are saying, and inform our audiences and retain respect for our own knowledge and respect for what we're actually sharing. Emilija, what do you think about that kind of idea of building
yeah. So that's definitely worth exploring further, and I do agree that certain data is not there and we need to expand this further. But we should not forget that Google is not providing us with answers that actually people don't care about. So It's basically something that is still useful for the users. I mean, we say we optimize for Google, but we do need to think about that we optimize for the users in the end, because they have the data in the background about what several billion of people are researching on the internet and how is that going. So we should be aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, so kind of using Google basically as a window into what our audience is actually interested in, which allows us to prioritize without necessarily excluding, which is what you're saying, Matt. You need to include everything, but perhaps Google just gives us this idea of prioritization of what people are looking for.
Yeah, I would say with the caveat based on what they already know to ask, right? Yeah. So nobody asked for an iPhone, but Apple was smart enough to just create one the way they did. Yeah. I should say like smartphone in that design, right?
Yeah. No, 100%. And so, yeah, Google doesn't know what it doesn't know. And we come back to that again. So we come back around this, and we've got Alan Osborne saying 100%. I would agree. This is 100%. Incredibly valuable. Where will we go next with this discussion? Because we're going to be wrapping up. We've got another 10 minutes. Emilija, you're the one who knows the most about the tool and the concepts. Where do you want to take this next?
I think that we should conclude this conversation by what Matt said before. Like, it's always good to work with both qualitative and quantitative data, and that we should be aware of the power of the tools that we're using, but we should also be able to use our own human superpowers to be sure that we're not experiencing any bias in the process and that we have the full picture. So when we use the both of the worlds, for me, ideal process is to start with my own keywords in the tool and then proceed with the analysis further, because that way we are sure that we combine the data from multiple places, like all the interviews, other keyword research tools, and so on, and then proceed with the analysis from there. And for me, that's the ideal approach, considering everything that was said during the webinar today.
Right. And Matt, do you feel that within the industry, when we're creating this content, we rely too much on tools, and that, your anthropological qualitative approach is missing, or just undervalued or underrepresented?
Well, the truth is it's undervalued in the world. Like if you just look even in like the social sciences, who gets invited to be a talking head on the news, or whatever example, I could give you a bunch, right? It's not so much people who are using strict qualitative methods or who lean towards those. We have a big quant bias in the world, largely world over. I won't speak for all cultures, but largely across the world, there's a quant bias. And so, yeah, I do think that, this perspective is largely probably unheard. I don't think you have many people on your show saying this. And I do think many people lean on tools a little too much. I would say that, tech is a tool, but it's not like a rule, right? It's not the end goal. It's a means to the end. And so, I'll maybe, since we only have a few minutes left, I'll kind of close with like maybe a way of thinking about it. And I can do this one of two ways, to try to bring it down. The first would be like, again, if you have known knowns, something you know everything about, maybe you just go right to a tool like Wordlift and you just start writing about the entities because you know it. If it's sort of known unknowns where, you're you're aware, but you don't understand it, or unknown knowns, like either way, like, maybe you're going to want to start with a tool and expand on that with something like a little, by interviews, talking to people and developing your knowledge in a more intimate human way, or vice versa, right? You could approach it either way. If it's an unknown, and if it's knowledge that's not modeled in the world, you simply cannot use tools. And so you need to talk to humans. And if you want to break into like, a sector in that space, like if you wanted to write about this indigenous language that I'm talking about, you likely need to talk to the people who know how to speak the language and understand their perspective and their culture and, the attributes that go along with that, and then do something with that data. Maybe then you plug it into a tool, that helps you expand that. But, so I think it all depends on how well you understand the problem space. And from there, you can figure out what the solution is. Another very quick way to say this would be in UX, right? In UX all the time, we there's like, just take a simple conversion. You might see that people aren't converting on the website, signing up, filling out a form. Well, you might know that from the analytics, but you don't know why they're not, right? Is it the format? Is it the questions? Who knows? Unless you talk to somebody, you don't know why. Now, I also might know from people, whether it's, website or app, whatever it may be, that they don't, like something's not resonating, and then I might go look to see if there's analytical data to support that. And so that's, two examples to sort of illustrate how I think, we need to think about this and appreciate that tool is there, tech is there to enable us, not necessarily to replace us.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. And it is incredibly tempting to think I'm just going to use the tool to take a shortcut. It's going to be really simple and I don't really need to do any work. And that's what I was talking about the 36 hours for, is I can't imagine spending 36 hours on an essay today. Emilija, have you got any closing comments before we go?
I think everything was beautifully said, and I completely agree with Matt that we should not underestimate our own power to explore further and actually talk to people. So I do encourage you, do not rely only to tools. Do go out and speak with your customers and have that as an established process that is going regularly, not something that you will just do for the sake of doing it. And then combine that knowledge with the tools that you're already using, or maybe this new idea of using Wordlift and so on.
So qualitative and quantitative, which I now understand, in parallel, working together, humans dancing with machines, and we are all building the airplane as we fly. Thank you so much, Matt. That was brilliant. Thank you, Emilija. That was awesome. A really, really, really lovely conversation. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And thank you, Anton, for behind the scenes and putting the brand cert book up on the screen. But a promotion for me, always thankful and grateful for that. So, Emilija, do you want to sing the outro song?
Well, actually, one thing on the Wordlift tool, you come up, brand SERP comes up and brand SERP guy comes up as an entity. So the Wordlift tool works very well as the work that you're putting
in. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you so much, Emilija. Please do sing. Last time I interrupted you.
Oh, to be honest, I had some problem with my singing capabilities lately, so I will leave this to you this time. I was very in mood when we spoke on the first webinar, but please do it this time.
A quick goodbye to end the show. Thank you, Emilija and Matt.
Many thanks to you both. Take care all.
Have fun. Thanks. Bye.